The platform wasn't failing. It was being sacrificed. The drill floor had no patience for outsiders. Heat pressed down from the overhead lamps, mixing with the metallic stink of drilling mud and hydraulic oil. 3 miles below the platform, the worn bit resisted extraction like it was fused to the earth itself. The hoist strained, cables singing under tension. Every vibration traveled up through steel into bone. This was work that punished hesitation. Jared Cole stood at the center of it, boots planted wide on the graded floor, eyes tracking pressure gauges without consciously thinking about it. Years on rigs had trained him to read machines the way other men read faces. The pitch of the hoist motor was wrong by a fraction. The mud return was thicker than it should be. Not dangerous. Not yet. But it demanded respect. "Hold it steady," he said into his headset, voice flat, carrying just enough authority to cut through the noise. The crew responded immediately. No questions. No second-guessing. They trusted him because he'd never asked them to trust luck. The bit broke free with a violent jerk, spraying mud across the lower railing. A couple of men laughed, the sound sharp with exhaustion. 12 hours into the shift, everyone was coated in grime and sweat, muscles trembling from repetition. That was when the elevator doors opened. Jared noticed the silence first. Not total silence. This place never shut up, but a hesitation, a fracture in rhythm. He turned his head and saw her step out onto the deck. She didn't match the environment. Her boots were clean. Her coveralls were issued, not earned. A white helmet sat straight on her head, unmarred by grease or impact scars. She held a tablet tight against her body, knuckles pale, like it was the only solid thing she trusted on the platform. She didn't flinch at the noise. That bothered him more than if she had. She walked forward with purpose, eyes scanning equipment, displays, men. Not curious, assessing. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear, pitched to carry without shouting. "Shut down drilling operations immediately." The words landed like a dropped tool, wrong, disruptive. No one moved. The crew looked to Jared automatically. He faced her fully now. "You want to repeat that?" "Sloan Rivers," she said. "Geological risk assessment. I'm issuing a stop order on extraction effective now." A murmur rippled through the floor. Jared could feel irritation rising behind his ribs, hot and fast. He'd seen her type before, corporate analysts with clean hands and tidy theories. They flew in, disrupted operations, and flew out before consequences caught up. He stepped closer until they were separated by less than an arm's length. "We're in the middle of a bit replacement at 3 miles. You don't interrupt that without cause." Her eyes didn't drop. They were steady, sharp, annoyingly unafraid. "Your downhole pressure trend has been unstable for the last 6 hours. Continuing extraction increases the risk of casing deformation." He barked a short laugh. "Pressure trends fluctuate. That's drilling. That's rationalization," she replied. "Not analysis." That earned a few low chuckles from the crew. Jared felt them at his back, an unspoken challenge to his authority. He couldn't let this turn into a debate. Not here. Not in front of them. He lifted the torque wrench slightly, letting its weight speak for itself. "You ever hold one of these while the rig fights you?" Her jaw tightened. "Experience doesn't override physics." He leaned in, voice dropping. "And theory doesn't override reality. This well has been stable for weeks." "You changed operating parameters yesterday," she said, tapping her tablet. "And you didn't update the geological risk model." That landed closer to home than he liked. "You don't understand the constraints we're working under," he said. "Schedules. Loads. Crew fatigue." "I understand failure modes," Sloan said. "And I understand what happens when warning signs get ignored because stopping costs money." The laughter behind him died out. Jared straightened, letting irritation harden into something colder. "This is my floor. These men answer to me. If you have concerns, you take them upstairs." Her gaze flicked briefly to the crew, faces streaked with mud, eyes ringed with exhaustion, then back to him. "If this well fails, they're the ones who pay first." Something in her tone cut through the noise. Not fear, not accusation. Certainty. Jared felt it then, not doubt, but the threat of doubt. And that, to him, was unacceptable. "Get off my drill floor," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The rig thundered on, but the space between them went rigid. Sloan held his stare for a long second, unreadable, then nodded once. No apology. No retreat. She turned and walked back toward the elevator, boots still clean as they crossed steel soaked in mud. The doors closed. The indicator light slid downward. The crew exhaled as one. "Corporate," someone muttered. Jared didn't respond. He returned his attention to the gauges, to the familiar language of pressure and torque. But the rhythm fell off now, like a machine running just slightly out of alignment. He told himself it was nothing, just another interruption. Another outsider who didn't belong. The thought didn't settle. Jared hadn't even finished washing the mud from his hands when the call came in. The locker room smelled of disinfectant fighting a losing war against oil and sweat. He stared at the vibrating phone on the bench for a second before answering, already knowing who it would be. "Miller," he said. "Jared." The vice president's voice was smooth, unhurried. "Come up to the admin module." Now. The line went dead before Jared could respond. He changed without rushing, pulling on a clean shirt that still carried the faint chemical bite of the rig's laundry. By the time he reached the administrative level, the noise of the drill floor had dulled into a distant vibration. Carpet replaced steel grating. The air was cooler, filtered, obedient. Miller Graves was waiting in his office, standing by the window that overlooked the platform. 50 years old, tailored jacket, no helmet. He looked like a man who'd never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. "Close the door," Miller said. Jared did. The lock clicked softly behind him. Miller gestured to a chair, but didn't sit himself. "You had an encounter today." Jared crossed his arms. "If you mean your geologist, yeah? She disrupted operations." "She raised concerns," Miller corrected, still watching the rig through the glass. "That's her job." Jared snorted. "She doesn't know this site. She doesn't know my crew." Miller finally turned. His expression was sympathetic in a practiced way. And that's exactly the problem. He walked behind the desk and sat, folding his hands. Sloan Rivers was brought in because something needs to be pinned down. Equipment failures. Cost overruns. Upper management wants accountability. Jared felt a tightening in his chest. Failures that happened before she arrived. Details, Miller said lightly. In reports, timing is flexible. He leaned forward. She's looking for a narrative. Someone on site to carry responsibility. Someone with authority. The implication hung in the air. "You're saying she's here to bury me," Jared said. "I'm saying," Miller replied, "that if she shuts this well down, there will be an investigation. And investigations need names." Jared's jaw clenched. "We followed protocol." "Protocol is what lawyers argue about after the fact." Miller's tone softened. "I'm trying to protect you." Jared laughed once, humorless. "By calling me up here and telling me I'm a target?" "By giving you a chance," Miller said. "Man to man." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed graphs, pressure curves, maintenance logs. Jared recognized his own handwriting on several pages. "Sloan's models rely on data inputs," Miller continued. "Inputs you provide." Jared looked up. "You want me to lie?" "I want you to contextualize," Miller said. "Highlight inconsistencies. Emphasize operational noise. Make her conclusions look premature." Jared pushed the folder back. "That's not my job." Miller's smile faded, just a fraction. "Your job is to keep this platform producing. To keep your men employed. To keep yourself out of a courtroom." Silence stretched between them. The distant hum of machinery pressed in, reminding Jared of everything below them. Steel under stress. Lives tied to decisions made in rooms like this. "She's dangerous," Miller added quietly. "Not because she's wrong. Because she's isolated. If her report stands uncontested, it becomes truth." Jared stared at the folder again. He thought of the crew laughing on the drill floor. Of authority earned through endurance, not signatures. "And if I don't play along?" he asked. Miller leaned back. "Then when something goes wrong, and something always does, your name will be the one attached to it." The words settled like weight. "Keep an eye on her," Miller said. "Know what she's looking at. Make sure her data doesn't misrepresent reality." Jared stood. His voice was flat. "You're asking me to babysit." "I'm asking you to survive," Miller replied. Jared turned toward the door. His hand paused on the handle. "She doesn't scare me," he said. Miller smiled again, thin and confident. "She should." Jared left the office and headed back toward the noise, the folder tucked under his arm like a liability he hadn't agreed to carry. Down below, the rig kept drilling, indifferent to politics, to narratives, to who would bleed if the wrong story won. Night changed the platform without softening it. The lights grew harsher, carving the rig into islands of brightness surrounded by black water and deeper darkness below. The wind picked up, carrying the constant smell of salt and oil through open corridors. Most of the crew was either on rotation or asleep, leaving the machinery to run with a leaner, quieter rhythm. Sloane Rivers moved through the service corridor with measured steps, tablet tucked under her arm, helmet lamp switched off. She didn't need the extra light. She knew exactly where she was going. The mud processing unit sat one level below the drill floor, a maze of pipes, vibrating screens, and settling tanks. This was where theory met residue, where numbers became material. She signed into the sampling station using a temporary access token she'd requisitioned earlier that evening. No alarms. No alerts. Good. She crouched beside the shale shakers, pulling on gloves already smudged with oil from previous inspections. The drilling mud flowed across the screens in thick, sluggish waves, carrying crushed rock from 3 miles below. She collected samples methodically, labeling each container, eyes flicking between the physical material and the live feed on her tablet. The pressure trend was still wrong. Subtle, but persistent. Not catastrophic yet. Not if everything else held. That was the problem. She accessed the materials log again, cross-referencing casing specifications against procurement records. The numbers didn't line up. At first she assumed a clerical error. She checked again. And again. The steel grade listed in the installation report was rated for higher tensile stress than the one flagged in the delivery manifest. Sloane froze. She pulled up the inventory database, fingers moving faster now. Batch numbers. Supplier codes. Delivery dates. The steel stored in the yard matched the cheaper grade. Margins shaved too close. Tolerances narrowed to almost nothing. Under current pressure conditions, it wouldn't fail immediately. It would deform first. Quietly. Invisibly. Until it didn't. Her breath slowed as the implication settled. This wasn't negligence. It was cost-cutting dressed up as logistics. Someone had signed off on this knowing exactly where the risk would land. She was mid-scan of the authorization trail when a shadow crossed the light from the overhead fixture. You planning to tell me why you're poking around my documentation at midnight? Sloane straightened slowly. Jared Cole stood at the entrance to the processing unit, arms crossed, expression carved from fatigue and suspicion. He hadn't bothered with a helmet light either. He didn't need one here. This isn't your documentation, she said evenly. It's the company's. That depends who's asking, Jared replied. He stepped closer, boots ringing softly against the metal walkway. You didn't have clearance to be down here. I requested it, she said. It was approved. Temporarily, he shot back. For observation, not audits. She turned the tablet so he could see the screen. Then explain this. He glanced at it, just long enough to register the numbers. His expression didn't change, but something tightened around his eyes. Steel grades get substituted all the time, he said. Supply issues. Not without engineering approval, Sloane replied. And not without updating the risk model. Jared took the tablet from her hand without asking. Scrolled. Paused. Scrolled again. These are procurement logs. Yes, she said. And they don't match your installation report. He looked up sharply. My report reflects what was specified, not what was delivered, Sloane said. And under this pressure curve, that difference matters. The machinery thumped around them, indifferent. Jared handed the tablet back. You think this means someone's trying to kill us, he said. I think someone decided the probability of failure was an acceptable cost, Sloane replied. And that if it happens, it won't be them explaining it to investigators. Jared's jaw flexed. You're jumping to conclusions. No, she said. I'm following the paper trail. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You know what happens if you push this? I know what happens if I don't, she said. Cheap steel under high pressure doesn't forgive optimism. They stood there, tension tight enough to feel physical. Jared glanced at the sample containers, at the screens shaking mud from stone. You shut this well down, he said slowly, and they'll tear this operation apart. People lose jobs. Lawsuits fly. Someone gets blamed. She met his gaze. And if you don't, someone dies. The words hung between them, stripped of drama. Jared looked away first. Toward the pipes. Toward the steel that had never asked to be trusted. You don't understand how this place works, he said. Survival isn't about being right. It's about knowing who takes the fall. Sloane didn't soften. Then maybe it's time the right person did. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Jared stepped back, giving her space without saying so. You shouldn't be down here alone, he said. That concern sounds new, Sloane replied. He didn't rise to it. Just watch yourself. He turned and walked away, boots fading into the machinery's rhythm. Sloane exhaled slowly, eyes dropping back to the tablet. The data hadn't changed. The threat hadn't either. Now it had a face. The lockdown began without an alarm. One moment the platform was operating in its stripped-down night rhythm. The next the access lights along the outer corridors shifted from green to amber. Doors sealed with a muted hydraulic thud, heavy and final. The internal network hesitated, then rerouted traffic through a restricted channel. In the administrative module, Miller Graves watched the status cascade down his screen. He didn't hurry. Systems obeyed him. They always had. Initiate integrity protocol, he said into his headset. Full perimeter. Internal only. Acknowledged, came the reply. Electronic locks engaged. On the lower levels, Sloane felt it as a vibration through the floor before she saw it. Her tablet pinged. Access revoked. Network latency spiked, then stabilized at a narrower bandwidth. She stopped walking. The corridor display ahead of her flashed a notification. System check in progress. Remain at current station. Convenient, she muttered. She turned and headed for the server room instead. If the system was isolating itself, the logs would be there, cached locally, untouched by corporate filters. She moved quickly, boots striking metal with controlled urgency. She made it halfway down the access ladder when a voice echoed up from below. Don't. Jared stood at the base, helmet off, face drawn tight. They just sealed the outer doors. She climbed the last rungs anyway. Then we're out of time. This isn't a drill, he said. Miller doesn't lock down a platform unless he's controlling something. That's exactly why I'm going in, Sloane replied. The server room door loomed behind him, a slab of reinforced steel with a biometric panel. Jared hesitated, then pressed his palm to the reader. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside, the air was cold and dry, a sharp contrast to the rest of the rig. Racks of servers hummed quietly, lights blinking in orderly patterns. The heart of the platform. The one place truth still left fingerprints. The door sealed behind them. Sloane didn't comment on it. She crossed straight to the central terminal and jacked in her tablet. Data streamed across the screen. Purchase orders, revision histories, authorization chains. There, she said, pulling up a set of entries. Steel procurement. Approved overrides. Jared leaned in, scanning fast. That's Miller's division. Yes, Sloane said. And look at the secondary authorization. His breath caught. His own name stared back at him. His signature, perfectly replicated. That's not, he stopped. He knew better. It didn't matter if it wasn't real. It existed. If the casing fails, Sloane said quietly, the report trail leads to you. The overhead lights flickered. Jared straightened. We need to get out of here. Sloane shook her head. If we leave without this, he deletes it. As if on cue, her tablet flashed red. Remote access attempt detected. Miller's voice came through the room's speaker, calm and disappointed. You really shouldn't have gone digging, Sloane. Jared clenched his fists. You set this up. I contained a problem, Miller replied. Now stay where you are. Security is en route to escort you both off-site. Escort, Sloane echoed. The network feed stuttered, then went dark. The servers kept humming. Outside the room, heavy footsteps began to move through the corridors, slow and deliberate. They weren't locked in for safety. They were being boxed in. The server room felt smaller once the network went dark. The hum of the racks filled the silence, steady and uncaring, like a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Jared stood rigid, eyes fixed on the terminal where his name still glowed on the frozen screen. That signature, he said finally. I never approved that order. I know, Sloane replied. Her voice was controlled, but there was no triumph in it. Forgery leaves patterns. Whoever did this knew your access level. Jared dragged a hand over his face, smearing a faint line of grease he hadn't fully washed off. So if those pipes fail, you're the last technical authority on record, Sloane said. Operations, maintenance, compliance. She didn't soften the words. There was no point. You go to prison. Miller files an insurance claim. The weight of it settled in his chest, heavier than the rig ever had. All those nights pushing crews. All the times he'd trusted the supply chain without question. It hadn't been negligence. It had been weaponized trust. They'd never convict on this alone, he said, more to himself than to her. They wouldn't need to, Sloane replied. Public pressure would do the rest. Footsteps echoed again outside the room, closer now. Voices, muffled but purposeful. Security. Contract men, not platform staff. That detail mattered. Jared looked at Sloane. Really looked at her. Not the corporate intruder from the drill floor, not the theoretical nuisance. Someone who'd followed the numbers to where they led, regardless of who stood in the way. You said this steel wouldn't fail immediately, he said. No, Sloane corrected. I said it would deform first. Quietly. That's worse. Jared nodded once. Decision settling in. Then we bleed pressure. Sloane's eye sharpened. You can't do that from here. I know, he said, but I can get us there. The door control panel flashed amber. A soft mechanical whine signaled a manual override attempt from the outside. Sloane unplugged her tablet. If they take this, it disappears. Then we don't let them, Jared said. The lock disengaged with a hiss. The door slid open just enough to reveal two figures in dark uniforms, hands already near their weapons. Jared moved first. He slammed his shoulder into the door, forcing it back into the frame. The metal shrieked. One of the guards stumbled, surprised. Jared didn't wait to see more. Go, he barked. They ran. The corridor swallowed them in shadows and emergency lighting. Behind them, shouts rose. Boots pounded metal. Jared took point instinctively, turning left, then down a service stairwell that bypassed the main routes. He knew this place in 3 dimensions, where sound carried, where cameras lagged, where systems trusted routine over anomalies. Why help me? Sloane shouted over the echo of pursuit. He didn't slow. Because if this blows, I'm already dead. They burst into a lower processing level, ducking between tanks and piping. The air grew warmer, heavier. Jared skidded to a stop behind a compressor housing, pulling Sloane down with him as flashlight beams swept past. For a moment, neither spoke. Their breathing synced without meaning to. This doesn't make us allies, Sloane whispered. Jared met her gaze, jaw set. It makes us necessary. The lights moved on. The footsteps followed. Trust didn't form in that moment. But something else did, an alignment born of survival, sharp and unavoidable. The footsteps didn't fade. They multiplied. Jared counted them by sound alone. 3, maybe 4 sets of boots spreading out, metal soles striking the grating with trained rhythm. Not platform crew. These men moved with spacing, covering angles, trusting each other to hold lines of sight. Stay low, he murmured, already moving. They slipped out from behind the compressor housing and into a narrow service passage that ran parallel to the main processing hall. Pipes crowded the ceiling, wrapped in insulation stained dark with age. The lighting here was inconsistent, pools of brightness broken by long stretches of shadow. Jared slowed just enough to pull a lever recessed into the wall. Somewhere above them, a valve groaned. What did you do? Sloane whispered. Shifted load, he said. Nothing dramatic. Yet. They moved again, boots careful now, avoiding loose grating. Voices echoed from the main hall. Orders, short and clipped. Split up. Check lower levels. Jared swore under his breath. They know the layout. They know a version of it, Sloane replied. She was already working on her tablet, fingers moving fast even as they walked. Security network is still up locally. Limited, but active. Can you blind them? Not completely, she said. But I can lie. A sharp clang rang out behind them. A flashlight beam cut across the corridor entrance. Jared didn't hesitate. He grabbed Sloane's arm and pulled her through a maintenance hatch barely wide enough for one person at a time. They dropped into a vertical shaft, sliding down a ladder rungless with grease. Jared hit the bottom hard, absorbing the impact, then reached up to steady her landing. The shaft opened into a pump control bay, cavernous and loud. Massive centrifugal pumps lined the space, housings vibrating under load. The noise was oppressive, a physical force that swallowed smaller sounds. Jared moved with purpose now, scanning gauges, listening. They won't fire in here, he said. Too much ignition risk. That doesn't mean they won't grab us, Sloane replied. They'll have trouble hearing, he said, and twisted a manual bypass. One of the pumps surged, pressure spiking briefly before stabilizing. The change rippled through the system, subtle but intentional. Somewhere upstream, relief valves would chatter. Enough noise to mask movement. Enough confusion to force hesitation. Flashlights appeared at the bay entrance, beams slicing through mist and vibration. Shadows moved between the pumps. There, a voice called. By the control racks. Sloane tapped her screen, jaw tight. I just rerouted their location pings. They think we're 2 levels up. Good, Jared said. Let's make it convincing. He grabbed a hose line and cracked the valve. Hydraulic oil spilled across the grated floor, spreading fast, turning steel into a slick hazard. Then he kicked a loose tool into the darkness and let it clatter loudly. A curse followed. Then a heavy thud. Someone went down hard. They ran. The exit ladder led toward the separation units, a multi-tiered maze of tanks and catwalks stacked vertically. Jared took the stairs 2 at a time, Sloane close behind him, breath sharp in her ears. Every footstep echoed too loud. Every railing felt like it might betray them. Above, a shout. They're heading into separators. Jared veered off abruptly, pushing through a maintenance door into a narrow interstitial space between units. Heat radiated from the metal walls. The air was thin, stale. They stopped short at a dead end. Sloane turned, eyes flashing. You said you knew this place. I do, Jared said, already scanning upward. Just not the way they expect. He reached up, fingers finding a recessed latch, and shoved. A panel swung open, revealing a vertical crawl space barely wide enough for shoulders. Sloane stared at it. You're kidding. No, he said. I'm improvising. They climbed, muscles screaming as they pulled themselves up into the shaft. Metal pressed close on all sides. The platform vibrated around them, every thump magnified. Jared went first, bracing himself, then reached back to steady Sloane as she followed. Below them, the door burst open. Flashlights stabbed upward. Movement. Vertical shaft. Jared pushed harder, forcing his body upward despite the burn. Sloane's breathing was loud now, uncontrolled. He paused just long enough to let her catch up, one hand braced against the wall beside her head. Slow, he whispered. They hear panic. She nodded, swallowing hard, and adjusted her breathing to match his. A gunshot rang out below. The round sparked uselessly against steel. They reached the top and rolled out onto a narrow catwalk, the drop on either side dizzying. Jared didn't stop. He dragged Sloane along the rail and into the shadow beneath a massive overhead conduit. Below them, guards flooded the lower level, shouting over each other, frustrated. Sloane leaned against the rail, chest heaving. They're hunting us. Jared watched the movement below, eyes cold and focused. No, he said. They're chasing. He glanced at the pressure readouts mounted along the conduit. The numbers were climbing, slow but steady, indifferent to human conflict. And chases can be turned, he added quietly, into traps. The catwalk narrowed to barely a shoulder's width. Beneath, the machinery's rumble grew louder, a constant pulse that seemed to synchronize with their own racing hearts. Jared pressed Sloane against the conduit, shielding her from a sudden searchlight that swept the walkway behind them. The platform's ventilation shaft, a narrow tunnel above the pumps, offered only the faintest cover, but it was all they had. Her breath hitched as she adjusted herself to the cramped space. Metal walls pressed in on both sides. One misstep meant to fall into the maze of spinning pumps and pressurized pipes below. Jared's hand shot out instinctively, covering her mouth. The contact was brief, necessary, but the warmth lingered, a spark neither wanted to acknowledge. Sloane froze, eyes wide, caught between fear and something else she hadn't expected in this chaos. Shoo, Jared murmured, his voice low, almost drowned by the machinery. Don't let them hear us. Sloane's tablet slipped slightly in her hand. He grabbed it, holding it just out of reach of the nearest surveillance sensor. For a moment, time slowed. The platform's usual grind faded into the background, leaving only the press of their proximity, the tension in every muscle, and the sound of their breathing mingling. Are you okay? She whispered, the words almost lost beneath the hum of the pumps. Jared's jaw tightened. You need to stay calm. Move only when I say. He let his hand drop from her mouth, but his grip lingered lightly on her arm. The air between them was electric, charged by fear and adrenaline. Neither could ignore it. A shadow flickered in the ventilation grating above. Jared pushed her further into the recess, crouching to keep them both unseen. He could feel the tension in her body, mirrored in his own. Every nerve screamed danger, yet in that constricted space, the danger was inseparable from the attraction he hadn't expected to feel. Sloan met his eyes. This is insane. Insane, he agreed quietly. But it works. The pounding of boots below reminded them of reality. A searchlight swept past the edge of the platform. They were trapped in the shaft, pressed together, forced into proximity by circumstance. Jared shifted, creating just enough space for Sloan to check the tablet. Her fingers brushed his as she adjusted the controls, an electric jolt neither could deny. "You're careful," she murmured. "Even now." He smirked faintly, tension in his eyes. "Survival requires precision. You keep me alive, I keep you alive. That's the rule." She exhaled slowly, letting herself trust him in this impossible closeness. Fear had brought them together. Adrenaline had sharpened everything. And now, against the hum of the platform and the threat closing in, they were aware of each other in a way neither had expected. The ventilation shaft offered no comfort, only claustrophobic intimacy, but for a fleeting moment, the rig became a world where they depended on each other completely. The next move would either pull them apart or force them to act as one. "Ready?" Jared whispered, pressing a shoulder gently against hers to steady their balance. Sloan nodded. "Let's go." The shaft ahead waited, dark, narrow, and dangerous, but now they faced it not just as co-conspirators in survival, but as a team. The danger had drawn them together, and the first real connection, electric, unavoidable, had been made. They emerged from the ventilation shaft into a junction of catwalks and pump housings. The platform's hum was deafening, reverberating through the metal floors, masking any smaller sounds they made. Jared scanned the area, eyes sharp, muscles coiled. The guards were close, but uncoordinated now, their confusion amplified by the layout and the system disruption Sloan had initiated. "Follow my lead," he whispered. Sloan stayed tight behind him, tablet clutched like a weapon. Her fingers flew across the interface, hacking the internal monitoring system in real time. Alarms that should have alerted the guards flickered and reset, lights blinking inconsistently. The pursuers were blind to their actual position, disoriented by the phantom movements she created. Jared moved with purpose, leveraging his intimate knowledge of the rig. A valve here, a pressure release there, subtle shifts that could create bursts of steam, sudden whooshes of air, or uneven vibrations along the grating. He used them to mask their movement, to slow the guards, to make them hesitate at every junction. One misstep, and a pursuing boot would slip on the slick of hydraulic oil Jared had already spread. "Watch the gap in the piping," he hissed, ducking under a crossbeam. Sloan followed, pivoting the tablet so she could track sensor feeds and detect the nearest intrusion. One guard appeared at the far end of the catwalk, flashlight sweeping. Jared twisted a pressure valve, sending a hiss of steam up through a side vent. The man stumbled back, blinded for a second. Another slip on the slick metal behind him bought them precious seconds. "Perfect," Sloan murmured, eyes scanning rapidly. "I'm rerouting camera feeds. They'll think you're still 2 sections back." Jared nodded, sweeping another corridor with his flashlight. "Then let's keep moving. We're not safe yet." They ducked beneath a service ladder, emerging into the main pump bay. The chase intensified, guards shouting, boots pounding in a rhythm meant to intimidate. Every sound they made was deliberate. Every move was a trap. Sloan tapped her tablet again, overriding a locked control panel to temporarily disable the networked motion sensors along the upper catwalk. "That should slow them," she said. For a minute, Jared moved toward the stairwell leading to the separator units. He could feel the rhythm of the facility, the vibrations of pumps, the pressure in the pipes, the subtle hum of electrical systems. Each variable was a weapon if used correctly. He flicked a switch to open a hydraulic bypass, creating a minor surge that sent a spray of mist along the walkway above the guards. They cursed and shielded their eyes, lost for a heartbeat that stretched like an eternity. Sloan kept pace, tapping commands into the tablet, rerouting internal lights, blocking remote doors, amplifying confusion. Their movements were synchronized, an unspoken partnership born of necessity. Muscle and mind combined. Jared's intimate understanding of the rig's mechanics, Sloan's command of data and systems. "Almost there," he said, glancing at the stairwell leading to the main control corridor. "Once we reach the panel, we can stabilize the well." Sloan exhaled, focused. "Then it's just a matter of execution." Above, the guards regrouped, but it was too late. Every technical obstacle, every misdirection, every improvised hazard Jared and Sloan had created had thinned the pursuit. The labyrinth of pumps, separators, and catwalks had become their ally. They weren't just surviving. They were turning the rig itself against their pursuers. Muscle, brain, and engineering now acted as one unstoppable unit. Each step forward increased their advantage. Each obstacle they used showcased the lethal synergy of his strength and her intellect. Jared glanced at Sloan as they approached the central stairwell. Ready for the final push? She met his gaze, determination sharp. Let's finish this. The chase had become a calculated game, and they were no longer just escaping. They were setting the terms of the fight. The main control corridor stretched before them, a narrow spine of metal walkways and pressure gauges, humming with the life of the rig. The glow of warning lights painted the walls in harsh reds and yellows. Jared's eyes scanned every panel, every railing, every shadow. They had made it this far, but the final obstacle awaited, the main panel controlling well pressure. Above them, the alarm had begun to sound, a shrill, insistent wail. Miller's voice boomed through the emergency intercom. "Cole, stand down. This ends now." Jared didn't hesitate. Not until it's safe. Sloan moved to the terminal ahead, fingers flying across the tablet. Data streamed in real time. Casing pressures, valve status, critical thresholds. Every second counted. One miscalculation, one delayed command, and the entire well could rupture. Footsteps pounded behind them. The escort had followed them through the maze, but their confusion and Jared's improvised hazards had delayed them. They rounded the corner, armed, but Jared was ready. He shifted a steam vent, sending a scorching blast into their path. Two guards yelped and stumbled, giving him the opening he needed. Miller appeared at the edge of the walkway, face pale but eyes furious. "Stop this. You'll destroy the rig." Jared didn't respond. Instead, he lunged forward, engaging Miller in a brutal struggle. The older man was strong, but Jared had speed, leverage, and desperation on his side. They fought hand-to-hand atop the narrow catwalk, steel beneath them slick with hydraulic residue. Each punch and grapple brought them dangerously close to the edge. Sloane's hands didn't pause on the tablet. She rerouted valves, adjusted pressure relief, and bypassed automated systems, her mind calculating seconds and sigh with unerring precision. "Jared," she shouted, "you need to hold him until I override the last valve." He gritted his teeth, blocking Miller's strikes, twisting to keep them both from falling. The metal groaned beneath their weight. "Do it," he yelled. Sloan tapped the final sequence, heart hammering. A hiss and a subtle shift in the readings confirmed it. Pressure was stabilizing. The well would not blow. Miller roared, realizing his plan was failing, and swung wildly. Jared sidestepped, using the man's momentum to send him sprawling backward. Miller grabbed the railing, but Jared had anticipated it. He seized the upper hand, pushing him away just enough that security below could intervene without firing. Sloan exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples, eyes still glued to the terminal. "It's done," she said. "Pressure stabilized. The casing will hold." Jared lowered himself, chest heaving. Miller struggled to his feet, glaring at them both, defeated and trapped by his own hubris. The backup call Sloan had set through the reserve channel triggered outside, law enforcement approaching to secure the platform. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the rig returned to its normal rhythm, the alarms silenced, the immediate danger over. Jared extended a hand to Sloan, not as a boss to a subordinate, not as a man to a woman, but as an equal, both bloodied by adrenaline and exhaustion. She grasped it, firm and steady. They stood on the edge of the walkway, overlooking the stabilized well, surrounded by steel and machinery that had almost become their tomb. Oil and sweat coated their bodies, but the silence now felt heavy with relief rather than threat. No promises were exchanged, no declarations made. Only the unspoken truth lingered between them. In this world, trust was scarce, and they had earned it. Not lightly, not easily. And for the first time, Jared realized that she was the only one he could truly rely on. Sloan understood the same. The platform beneath them groaned and hissed, alive, indifferent. But for the first time, the humans on it had tamed a danger that could have destroyed everything. Together, the sun began to rise over the horizon, casting steel in pale gold. Exhausted, Dirty, yet unbroken, Jared and Sloane stood side by side, witnesses to the fragile victory that had cost so much and revealed everything. The first light of day struck the platform like a cold revelation. Steam rose from vents, mist curling around the catwalks and railings, giving the steel a ghostly glow. The rig, vast and indifferent, seemed almost serene after the chaos of the night. Jared and Sloane stood at the edge of the main deck, the wind tugging at their hair and clothes, still smeared with oil and grime, bodies aching from exertion. Below them, uniformed officers secured the platform. Miller had been detained, cuffed, and escorted toward the awaiting vessel. His face was a mask of fury and disbelief, the reality of his failure pressing down like the rig itself. Jared had watched silently, understanding that the man's empire of manipulation was over and that the consequences for others had been narrowly avoided. Sloane exhaled, leaning against the railing. Her tablet, still clutched in one hand, was the final witness to the night's events. "They won't be able to bury this," she said, eyes scanning the horizon. "Everything's documented, safe. The well is stable, the evidence intact." Jared nodded, shoulders slumping as fatigue finally caught up with him. "Yeah, but we still have to deal with the cleanup. And the paperwork." She smirked faintly, a ghost of humor in the exhaustion. "Some things never change." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun climb, steel bathed in pale gold and shadow. The platform groaned as if sighing, alive, indifferent, yet tamed. "Why did you help me?" Sloane asked suddenly, voice low. Jared looked at her, the edges of exhaustion softening his usual sharpness. "Because it was the right thing to do. And because if I didn't, neither of us would have made it." Sloane didn't reply immediately. She simply looked out over the water, then back at him. In her expression, he read acknowledgement, a quiet agreement that no one else on the rig, or in the company, could be trusted like this. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of salt and oil. Birds called from distant masts. The platform hummed its steady rhythm, the dangerous night behind them, the world still indifferent. Yet they had survived. Together, Jared extended a hand, not as an authority, not as a protector, but as an equal. Sloane took it, a brief, firm grasp that said more than words ever could. The sun rose fully now, burning gold onto the rig. The steel reflected it sharply, the horizon clean and unbroken. For the first time, they could breathe without calculation, without immediate threat, knowing that the truth was theirs and their actions had mattered. No promises, no plans, just a shared understanding. In a world built of risk and betrayal, there was now one certainty: they could trust each other. And for Jared and Sloane, in the aftermath of the night, that was enough. The rig continued its indifferent song, the steel beneath their feet solid, and the dawn over the water marked not just a new day, but the fragile, hard-won peace that only those who survive together can know. Thank you for listening to the story. Write your thoughts in the comments.